So I went to Temple and said, how does my son become you? And she said, actually, Rupert, it's relatively easy. You have to do 3 things. These things are: follow the child, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. Do it outside, if you can, and let them move. And I said, okay, talk to me about follow the child. What do you mean by follow the child? She said, actually, that is also 3 things. You've got to follow them physically, because you've got to be in a place where you can observe them. Because they're not going to say, I want to go and play with the bit of paper, please. They're just going to go and do it. They're going to do it with their body. So you need to be present to observe what they get into, to follow that. Okay, I said, well, that makes sense. And then she said, you've got to follow them emotionally. And I said, what do you mean by that exactly? And she said, well, Rupert, you probably have noticed that there are meltdowns that happen out of the blue. But if you are there following them physically, you'll start to see patterns. And the patterns you'll generally see are sensory. That a sensory thing will trigger some negative reaction. And she said, mostly, Rupert, you will notice that the sensory negative triggers are mostly man-made. There's some classic ones like fluorescent strip lights, industrial noise, echo in a room, sound of a humming air conditioner or loud fridge or something like that. Certain smells. And in general, the positive sensory triggers will be natural, simply because the human nervous system is hardwired that way. And these kids have an oversensitive nervous system. So I said, well, that makes sense. Okay. So she said, yeah, and then you'll start to eliminate the bad sensory triggers from your environment, home environment, possible school, maybe school too. And you'll start to see things get better that way. I said, okay. And then she said, you've got to follow him intellectually. And I said, well, what does that mean? Because, I mean, I've got a 3-year-old non-verbal kid. I mean, I'm not exactly having conversations about Kierkegaard's philosophy here. I mean, what do you mean? She said, well, Rupert, it's all in the stims, the repetitive behaviors. So in the orthodox therapies, it's all about getting the kids to not do those behaviors. But those behaviors are, of course, a response to sensory stimuli. And we actually all do them. So, for example, if I write you each a check right now for £1 million, you'll go, yay! You'll do a little stim. But if I point an AK-47 at you, you'll do exactly the same thing, in a stressed way. It's a stim, but it's a self-stimulatory activity. So we all do these things, but of course it's much more extreme with autism. And it's often about self-soothing in stress. And you do this too. When you're anxious, you rock. Why do you rock? We'll go into that. Why is she rocking that baby right now? No one had to tell her. She didn't have to go to special baby rocking school to learn that when you got a baby, you've got to jiggle it up and down and rock it. It's hardwired into us. We're going to talk about why. This is what you need to look at. How is the kid stimming? So I said, explain more. She said, okay, let's say you have a kid who stims in a very repetitive pattern base. So that's usually a math science brain. And she said, if it's more randomized and sort of exploratory, you're dealing with an arts storytelling kind of brain. And I thought, that's really interesting. Only an autistic person would be able to give you that sort of inside information. That's really good. And I said, what about the doing it outside? Well, she said, well, that's because of the fewer negative sensory triggers. I said, well, that makes sense. And then tell me about the movement. She said, well, most people are in fact primarily kinesthetic or kinetic learners. We all learn better while doing. You know, if we're going to learn Charlotte's thing, it's better to do that while we're actually doing it with her at our shoulder than if we just try and sit and watch a video to do it. It's going to work better because we're monkeys that work that way. And but particularly people with neuropsychiatric stuff, it's even more acute. So if you make them sit still, they'll learn one thing, that's how to sit still at the desk, under extreme stress. And then there'll be so much stress that they can't learn anything else. So all this makes perfect sense. So I went home and I fired my ABA therapist and followed my son outside. And it wasn't my idea to go near a horse. I'd actually given up riding because I thought my son wasn't safe around horses. But he went out into the woods at the back of the house, and he immediately wanted to put stuff in his mouth. And I got, okay, I've got a choice here. I can say yes or I can say no. Now, I want to get communication, so I don't want to be saying no, so I better find out what he can put in his mouth. Luckily for me, I had a background in human rights, and my family's from Africa. So I spent a lot of time living with hunting and gathering tribes, and I know that in pretty much any environment on planet Earth, between 60 and 80% of what you see is edible. So I thought I'll learn the 10 most obvious. And let them move and be outside. Yeah. Oh, that's them in a negative way. So I quickly learned the 10 most obvious plants, and we started foraging together. And I couldn't explain toxicity and edibility, but I could say this is a daddy leaf and this is not a daddy leaf. And so we would go foraging for daddy leaves. And suddenly we had communication, and we had science, and we had exploration, and we had adventure, and we had fun. This is really important. And it's a very underrated thing, fun. Joy, right? That's the lovely thing about this way of training the horse. It brings the joy into the horse. Café, when it's done like that, it's very joyful, playful. And it was then that he noticed my neighbour's horse on the other side of the woods and went to her and forged his own connection with her. I happened to know this horse. I knew she was very quiet, old quarter horse mare. So I thought, okay, you know. So he went to her and just started with his body, obviously showing that he wanted to get up. So I'm following the kid. Okay, fine, I know this horse. So I just put him on her back while she was grazing, kept a hand on him, and all of his agitated behaviours just went away. Well, this is interesting. So I thought, well, maybe what happens if I ride with him? This being Texas, big old Western saddle. That's how all the kids there learn to ride. They grew up in front of mum and dad in the saddle. So I did that, and on the first day that we were riding, he had a little bit of echolalia by then. If you don't know what echolalia is, it's where they repeat stuff that they've heard, but they don't necessarily know what they're saying. And we rode down towards a pond, and a big heron got up and flapped away. And he said, "Heron." I said, "Fuck me." Because I'm sorry, but I did. And because that was appropriate speech. And I didn't even know he knew that word. And very quickly he started taking choices, and I noticed almost immediately that I got more response at the trot than at the walk. And when I went to the canter, interesting. Have no idea why, but hey, I mean, I'm on a horse with my kid. This is good. He's talking. What's not to like? So I just start to live this way. I'm up there with him, I don't know, between 2 and 4 hours a day. And I don't mean solidly riding. You know, you ride for a bit, get down, play. Ride for a bit, get down, play. But his language came. And I thought, well, if language, what about reading? So following his interests, we're singing the Lion King songs because he was obsessive about the Lion King. So I would paint letters on trees, and you know, an S and then to an I and then an M and then a B and then an A, and also learning what kind of trees they are and whether you can eat. And there'd be a little Simba toy waiting for him, like at the end. And he flat out learned to read. And I thought, what about numbers? So I started getting groups of friends and family to sort of cluster up. And we'd remove one with farts, making him wear a silly hat or something like that, and then we'd count how many were left, and then we'd add back, and then I'd charge them, so they'd all have to split up into equal groups, division, and then I'd round them up with farts, because it was funny, for me anyway, because I never graduated beyond 2 years old. And we learned multiplication, and this basic arithmetic, all of this stuff happened relatively quickly. And then I got curious. I thought, well, is it just him? Is it other kids as well? So I started running play dates at our farm, just as much to give him a bit of a social life as anything else. And I realized very quickly that we were getting a universal response, but not just from the special needs kids, also from their siblings who were not special needs. And I would always ask for the siblings to come out because they know the kid so well. So you're going to get more information from the brother and the sister than you will from the parents. The parents and project all their shit onto the kid. But the brother and the sister can actually tell you, oh, when he makes this sound, it means this, or he hates this or he loves this. Stuff that might take you 2 years to figure out. So I would make sure I had lots of activities for the siblings. So let's say it was the sister who came, maybe she wanted riding lessons, no problem, have that going. Maybe the brother came, didn't care for horses, but he loved soccer, so I would get my friend who's a pro soccer coach to come and really coach them well, or other friends if they were into martial arts who are 18 down, temple dragon dude, and we'd do that. And so I made it attractive for the families to be there. And very quickly what I saw is if you address the whole family need, you suddenly take the stress out of the family, because you know this if you're a special needs parent, is that most of the energy in the family is going towards that kid. And as a parent, you can feel often quite guilty that you're not giving as much attention to the others. Maybe there's resentment from the others. It's stressful. It's quite rare to be in a position where all of their needs are being met at once. And suddenly we sort of hit on a relatively effortless way to do this. So then I got curious again. So I need to figure out why this is working. So again, journalists, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with the brain. So I go back to Temple Grandin, and I interviewed her again, and I went to neuroscientists at the University of California and at the Marie Curie Institute in Paris, and also in Germany a little bit, and I got the same answer from all of them. It's exactly what's going on in the brains of the horses when Charlotte's working them. And I'm going to draw you a diagram. It's easier to understand the picture. So frequently, what we're observing with autism and other neuropsychiatric things is distress. Sometimes quite big distress. And the problem is not the autism. Autism is a perfectly valid way of going through life. I know some very, very successful autistic people. I'm a writer. I've even had 2 bestsellers, but I haven't had them like Temple Grandin has, and she's way autistic. So imagine if I went into her office and said, oh, I'm going to give you therapy to stop you being autistic. She'd be like, well, why? It's perfectly, I'm successful with my autism. So the problem is not the autism. But what we don't want to have is human unhappiness, because that does get in the way of life. And usually that's going on because the kid or the person, being an adult too, has an oversensitive nervous system. And we don't know why, but we do know that that is the case. Oversensitive nervous system, and this is constantly triggering the part of the brain which governs fight, flight, and freeze, and that is called the amygdala, and it's your reptilian brain. It keeps you alive. What it does is it makes your body produce a hormone called cortisol. cortisol, cortisol. And cortisol is like a pair of scissors. You've got 2 main parts of your brain, a back bit and a front bit. I'm just going to borrow your brain for a second. If you look in this back part of her brain, it's all ticking along quite nicely. It's regulating her body temperature, her digestion, all the stuff she actually needs to stay alive that she's not aware of. This part of the brain in the front is saying, well, I wonder what's for lunch, right? In between, there's connectors. What the cortisol does is, like a pair of scissors, it momentarily cuts the connection. It's a neurotoxin. It kills the brain cells in that moment that are connecting, so that you act, you don't think. So that when an elephant explodes up out of the floor here and goes running through you, you don't keep listening to boring old hippie talking about boring stuff. You dive out of the way, and only when the elephant has gone through the fence and disappeared do you resume listening to boring old hippie. So you have no choice in that. That's what the cortisol does. It keeps you alive. The problem is if you're producing it all the time, you can't learn anything. That's why it's not a good idea to make long-term financial plans with your spouse in the middle of an argument, because you're full of cortisol and you're not likely to make a good decision. Wait till you cool down. Okay, so what happens is these people end up, because they're in environments that are constantly triggering these this oversensitive nervous system, that is then in turn constantly triggering this overactive amygdala, constantly producing too much cortisol. They end up in a vicious cycle. And if they're in a school that is has all these bad sensory triggers and then perhaps threatening triggers as well, you've got to be a bit of an arsehole-free zone when you're working with this type of special needs, because anything that can be interpreted as a threat is just going to trigger which just means if you're a bit grumpy even. So this is what we generally see. So the question is, how do we break out of this? It's really interesting. The key is not in the brain. Just like the key to the horse's back and hind quarters is not the hindquarters. The way to engage the hindquarters is to unlock the jaw. When you unlock the jaw, you relax the horse and he can actually access. If you can't really, no matter how much you kick him, you're not gonna. He might go faster, but he's not going to engage. All right. So it's a bit the same. The answer is in your booty. Okay, you've all got one. In my case, generous, a bit more than one. If you rock your hips in rhythm, it feels good. That's why you all ride horses. That's why you like to ride horses. That's why it's addictive to ride horses. And that's why it's particularly addictive to ride horses in that collective way. It just flat out feels amazing. It's the byproduct of that. It's not why it was invented, but it sure as hell feels good. So every time, when you give people their first taste of piaffe up there or passage, they don't come off going, yeah, that's all right. They're all like, oh my God, I need a cigarette. You know, it's ecstatic, all right? And the reason it's ecstatic is because it causes your body to produce another hormone that is the antidote hormone to the cortisol. And that is called oxytocin. So, of course, when I've got my kid on a horse nicely trained, well, what's happening is that the hips are being rocked in rhythm over a prolonged period of time. And I am flooding this kid with not just the feel-good hormone, but it's the hormone of communication. It makes you communicate. And why does it do that? It's tied up with our reproductive system. So we are super brain monkeys, and our brains are so big in relation to our body size that the human birth canal has not evolved to be wide enough to birth anything other than an embryo. So, and we don't have fur, we don't have claws, we don't have big teeth. So we fire out these embryos into the hunting and gathering context with everything that wants to eat your baby. And if one of the parents, it takes 20 years before they can really hold their own. So if one of the parents leaves, the chances, because there's a lot of challenges to bring this kid up, and it's exhausting, so maybe one of them just wants to bugger off. The chances of survival for the offspring go down massively. Okay, so the parent couple need a communicative bond that makes them want to problem solve. It's a really clever thing, and that's why our whole reproductive sexual thing is so different from basically all the other mammals. The way we go about the whole thing is really designed purely to get communication going and keep it going, because it's going to be quite a while before this kid is old enough. All right, so we're tapping into that, and what that does, it doesn't just make you want to communicate, but of course it calms your oversensitive nervous system. So it calms the nervous system, and then it tells the amygdala to shut up already. It says, hey, Mr. Amygdala, there actually isn't an elephant coming through the hall right now. And the amygdala, because it's a reptile, it's a dinosaur, doesn't have an emotional reaction to that. It says, oh, all right. And it just shuts down. And it stops producing the cortisol. And suddenly, this intellect that was behind a locked door, it's like we've got the key. And the guard dog, the cortisol that was outside that locked door going, as we approach it, we like chucked it a steak and gave it a little scratch behind the ear, and suddenly it's a puppy dog. And you end up with that smile. But there's more, and this is what I was talking about about this BDNF thing. I'm going to write it down. BDNF stands for, the B is brain, the D is derived, meaning produced by, the N is neuro, brain cells, trophic, growing of brain cells, factor, effect, basically the brain producing more of its own brain cells. And it's a bit like, I've got a little computer in this cell phone. If I ride all day and hike all day, imagine that it got stronger, the hard drive in there got bigger and bigger. And then maybe I go dancing at night and it keeps getting bigger. But then as soon as I go to bed and put it on the nightstand, it goes back to its original capacity. That's basically your brain. And that's why you want to keep moving. There's a parallel with dementia. You should not put old people in old people parking because their brains die. You should not have kids too much on screens. You can have hours a day on them, but they must also have hours a day running around outside because otherwise the brain doesn't develop properly. We've got to move. We're moving monkeys. And we need this brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Okay, so we basically grow them a new brain. And among these neurons that we're growing with the BDNF are a set of brain cells with a funny name. And they're produced in your cerebellum, at the base of your head. And they're called Purkinje cells. It sounds like a Pokemon character, Purkinje cells. But Purkinje was a Czech scientist in the 19th century. He found them, he discovered them. And the Purkinje cells in your brain are the things that create the good connections between the different parts of your brain. So you don't over-specialize in one area and under-specialize in another. But crucially, they also govern motor skills and social skills, both of which are a challenge with quite a lot, certainly with autism, but with other things too. We don't know why, but adult autopsies on adult autists have frequently shown a deficit of Purkinje cells. Even, and this is crazy, it's a mystery as to why, we may know in 20 years, a sort of self-pruning system of almost as they are produced. It's almost like an over-active immune system that attacks itself, attacks the own body. And so if you really target the BDNF in people that might have this going on, you suddenly see normalization of brain. And that's when you get really amazing stuff happen in front of your eyes. And then there's also anytime you're balancing, you're activating your vestibular system, which is in your inner ear. And that has to do with attention. The vestibular system has to do with attention and therefore long-term learning. So if you learn something while balancing, it's going to stay in your brain. That's why you should teach kids in playgrounds, because you're going to get BDNF, and you're going to get long-term learning, and you're going to get oxytocin. And suddenly you've got the kid or the person, it can be an adult as well, in a positive cycle. And you have strategies for what to do if you hit the negative cycle. So that's why what we do works. Now, you don't need a horse for this. So when I realized this, I thought, oh my gosh, we could just reproduce this on my shoulders, on a trampoline, a climbing gym on the wall of my house, ropes swinging from the ceiling of my living room. I did all these things because I was homeschooling as well, because I was in Texas. And amazing. It worked. We adapted the national curriculum this way, and now we work in schools. So we work in schools all over the world, and not just with special needs. Now with So that's called movement method. And if you're not going to work with horses, kidsmustmove.com, which I wrote there, will take you there, and we can train you how to do it. You can even learn it online on our website. But you are going to get a really nice effect with a horse, because a horse can go for like an hour giving you this oxytocin effect. There's not really anything else that can do that. And so if you happen to be in the hood of somebody like Alex, who can provide this service for you, so much the better. But it's not going to replace what you do at home. You've got to make it a 24/7 culture. All right. So that's one has to get out of this attitude that other people, other outside agencies, are going to somehow come in and fix it for me. No. You're going to fix it at home this way, but outside agencies can certainly help. Plus, it's fun, and it's joyful, and it's social. Because one of the biggest problems, if you're a special needs parent, is isolation. Particularly if you've got the kid that has the big meltdown in the supermarket. So you start avoiding it. I've certainly done that. Okay. And you want to go to a non-judgmental environment. Environment is the most important thing here. No bad sensory triggers, right? You want to be outside. We want to be in nature as much as possible. We want to have non-threatening people, and we want to have no bad sensory triggers. So I don't want to do this in a therapy room with a fluorescent strip light. I don't want to make a kid sit at a desk. No, I want to see what they do. I want to let them go nuts when they arrive, but I'm observing how are they going nuts. And I've got all these things for them to do, not just the horse. And if they don't want to get on the horse, I don't care. I've got a bazillion other things they want to do. And maybe they want to ride on Tuesday, but they don't want to ride on Thursday or whatever. It's very hard as horse people not to be too obsessive. Who is an obsessive horse person? Who can bore for England about horses? Who has watched other people when you've been going blah 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 about horses just going guilty as charged. So the problem is we fanatical horse people, we're a bit autistic, think we're like born again Christians. I'm going to proselytize you into the horse. Well, most kids, they might like the horse a bit, but then it's a minority of people who are really, really massively motivated to spend their entire life on the back of a horse. But it doesn't mean that we can't help them with our horses. But you've got to have more than that. You've got to have a lot of play equipment, and we also use small animals. So small social animals, really good. Dogs are good, cats are good, birds, chickens, goats, hamsters, anything. Some hamsters you can squash a bit, but you want them to be quite robust. The things I like about goats is you can't kill them. and they just remove themselves. When the kids try to, and they do, the ghost is like, dude, you can't kill me. It's very cool. And then we start usually with what we call sensory work. We just let the kids explore the horse, just like my son did. Not just the kids, adults. And when they go for this one, the butt hug, they might fall asleep up there. We've had that happen. I had one camp we did. We had the tents nearby, and the kid fell asleep up there. We managed to transfer him to a tent without waking him. He'd never slept for more than 3 hours in his life. He was about 7. His mum was just her arse was kicked. And he slept for 14 hours. It changed his sleep pattern. It was amazing. Really, really good work. This. And of course, you need to make sure that your horses are desensitized because you don't know what the kids are going to do. It's very, very, very important that you can behave in a non-horsey way around your horses because the kids sure as hell will, right? And what you don't want to be doing is saying, no, don't, stop. No, this is the rules. We're not the pony club. We have to train our horses way in excess of that, which is why we actually have to be quite obsessive about the horse training. It's the hardest side of what we do with Horse Boy Method is the horse training, because we've got to make damn sure that our horses can not only produce the oxytocin, but that they're just rock solid in every situation, like police horses. So we take them through all of that desensitization. Only then do we think about riding usually. So should we what the saddle? Now normally we work in a big old Western saddle, and it's an oversized Western saddle, usually 19 to 20 inches, synthetic, so it's not heavy. I train my horses in English saddles. I don't train a horse in a Western saddle because they can't really flex their back in it. It's a working saddle. But if I want the kid in front of me, I need some real estate. I need some room. And the nice thing about the Western saddles, you've got a little bit of security backwards and forwards, because I don't want to work in arenas. I'm in the forest. And when I'm out in the forest, I'm in Germany, wild boar jump out quite frequently, or that sort of thing. And if my horse does start or whatever, or the bloke comes by on the e-bike at 50 miles an hour with a pink umbrella or whatever, blasting techno, I want to make sure I have a bit more than just a saddle pad and a surf single behind me, because if my horse does this and I've got 50, 60 pounds of kid going that way and I'm here in the middle, I just want a bit of security. So I like the big Western saddle. And then we train them as Charlotte showed you. You'll see if you go onto that heliosharmony.com, you'll see what our therapy horses can do. Some of them are a Grand Prix. That we train them as far as we possibly can, because I need a meta horse. I need a horse that can really make good decisions. I need a horse that is far in excess in the brain, not just in the body, of your average horse, because I'm asking for that kind of cooperation. I basically am training a light cavalry horse, because I'm also going to work at the canter, because if I can work at this nice collected canter, then I'm going to get even more oxytocin. Don't worry if you can't do it at the canter. When we teach people horseboy method level 1, it's all at the walk. You're still going to get a very nice effect this way. But the more you can optimize it, the more you can optimize it. So over some years, we tend to bring our people up through that. Okay. And then we ride with the child in front of us. Why do we do that? The nice thing about having the kid in front of you is you're a voice in the ear. You're not a challenging frontal gaze. Hey, look at me, eye contact, eye contact. No, never do that. Because that's going to trigger the amygdala. It's a threat. It's not nice. It's not nice to have this at all. Yet so many therapists do that. And the kid's like, no, I don't want to. But when a kid is actually wanting to engage you, they're just going to make natural eye contact with you anyway. It's not some holy grail. We don't need to worry about it. So a voice in the ear is a good way to take in information with some oxytocin going on while exploring planet Earth. Because the difficulty with autism, what does autism even mean? You can tell me what autism means quickly. Who's an autism mum here? What does autism mean? Self. Auto, when an automobile moves by itself. Auto is the Greek word for the self, right? Autoism, selfism, locked within the self. The difficulty is the relationship with the exterior world. Suddenly, we're on this lovely thing here, exploring this exterior world while being filled with oxytocin, with radio commentary about what we're seeing, and the songs that you want to sing and all of that sort of thing. So, and deep pressure. A lot of the kids are sensory seekers. They love the deep pressure. Can I hand you Freddie? Now, usually when they get this big, we're not riding. When we're riding with our kid like this, we want to be like the radio. How many of you listened to the radio when you drove here in the car? Right. How many of you listened to perhaps the news? Did you hear the news? Yeah? Did you need to be looking at the newscaster while driving in order to take in the information that Putin's an idiot? No? No. You could very easily do something else. So never ask for attention. You could be doing the gardening while boring old hippie is telling you about BDNF and taking the information perhaps even better than if I make you sit on a chair where now you kind of need to move. Thinking, oh God, I've been sitting here a long time. Now I'm a bit stressed by this. I can't, what did he say? Oh, he said something. I don't know what he said. I want to talk to him. You know. Whereas if you're moving, you get this. Okay. Now, if you move a little bit more, can you give me a nice collected trot, maybe? I can begin to play games. You want to play rule-based games if you want to build the brain. All brain building is done through gameplay. But people on the spectrum often have a lot of problem with the understanding of rule-based games. So the nice thing about a horse is it carries you through the game. So the first game that all children in fact play is tag. It's the infinite loop, there's no winner, no loser. And it's how children train every culture. So if she's going to tell this kid what tag is, well, there's this thing called it. None of us currently are it. If I arbitrarily, for some reason that I can't explain, decide that I am it, you are not it. If I touch you, you become, how you go? But I can walk up to her, go, you're it, and run away. You go, oh no, Alex is it. Oh no, she's going to do it. She goes, evil Godzilla comes after me. Oh no, maybe if I fart, I can keep her away. Oh no, she's immune. And she got me. I'm it again. What do we say about people needing to move? You're it. You're it.
Go on.
Oh no, she's it. Oh. I'm it. You're it.
Oh, Erica, cheat.
Who can I get?
You knew that was coming, Pam. And in the meantime, the child is getting commentary from Alex going, oh no, now Martin's it. Oh, we better stay away from him, etc. And what happens is, you don't then say to the kid, so, what are the rules of it? What happens is, over about 12 to 24 weeks, the kid begins to take control of the game and say, she should get Pam should get Martin, blah, blah. And then you know they've got it. With no pressure, because pressure brings cortisol. Cortisol shuts you down. And then you begin to do ever more complex games, and you begin to show families that can't play with their kids. Actually, in these contexts, you can. But what do I do if I don't have a horse? Well, I can do my shoulders, maybe in a pool where they're a bit weightless, maybe in a wheelbarrow. We do a lot of stuff with wheelbarrows, trampolines, lots of strategies you can do. And then we introduce academics to this. So usually the first way I'll introduce academics is I'll do it through hide and seek. So let's say, for example, we've got Charlotte, and she's assisting us on our play dates. We also call them play dates, not therapy sessions. And she rides off, and she hides. Perfect. And we say, where did Charlotte go? Where did Charlotte go? I don't know. Maybe she went home. Well, where's home? Well, it's Sweden, actually. Well, kind of Cheshire as well. But, okay, well, what's Sweden? Well, Sweden's a country. Well, what's a country? Oh, well, that's interesting. A country is an area where a whole bunch of people, for whatever reason, sort of decide that they are the same culture, follow the same laws, and that's what we're in a country that we can't decide what we are. We call ourselves the United Kingdom. Sometimes we call ourselves England, but sometimes we call ourselves Britain. But we're this sort of triangle sitting out in an ocean, right here, and then there's this continent, just big landmass, lots of countries over here called Europe, and up at the top of Europe, way up there, where the Eskimos are, is Scandinavia and Sweden. It's actually a long way. We'd have to ride there. Well, it would take us about a month to get there. We'd have to get across the ocean as well. And then when we're there, let's say we get there, and okay, where are you? And she still doesn't answer. Oh yeah, because they don't speak English there. They speak Swedish. Oh, yeah, there's different languages. So where are you in Swedish?
Var är du någonstans?
Var är
du någonstans?
Var är du någonstans? But she still doesn't answer. Okay. Well, we can't see her, we can't hear her, we can't touch her, we can't taste her. Can we smell her? We don't. So what's scent? Scent is sweat and shit particles on the ground. So if she was to have dropped some of those on the way, maybe farting as she goes, it might be helpful to know what she ate. What do they eat in Sweden? They eat like a lot of fish. And a lot of like kind of manky old smelly fish. And they really like that manky old smelly fish. It's a manky old smelly cheese as well. And then they wash it down with a lot of beer. So then they're farting away. Why are they farting? Because when you put this beer into your, it's very bubbly, it's carbonated, it's got these bubbles, and that reacts with your stomach acids, which are the things that are breaking your food down and turning it into food. And that causes you to do a fart that smells a little bit like what you ate. Oh, but by the way, why do farts smell? Does anyone know why farts smell? Apart from mine smell of roses. Why do farts smell? Why do farts smell? Well, what is a fart? Is it a solid, a gas, or a liquid? sometimes it's 3. That's a shock. What is it? It's gas, right? It's like the air that we breathe, right? It's not solid like that tree, and it's not like water. Okay, but what gas is a fart? What's it made of? Methane. Does methane have an odour? No, it doesn't. It's an odourless gas. That's why the gas board has to put that odour in it so that you can detect a leak. It's an odourless gas. So if we're farting an odourless gas, why do our farts smell? Because inside our gut, we have these little buggers, these little animals, these little plants that eat what we eat and poo it out as they turn our food into nutrients for us. And they poo on our poo. And what they poo out is nitrogen and sulfur, so the eggy thing. So that's why farts smell. So if I do a fart and you say, Rupert, that's gross, it wasn't me. It's those little buggers in there. And then, of course, like, finding that you fart loudly. And we found it. Okay. That was academics. I just introduced geography. I introduced distance. I introduced time. I introduced languages. I introduced cuisine. I introduced physics, chemistry, and math. And the gut biome, and everything can be taught through poo. It goes in, it goes down, and then it goes up and round. Hydraulics, that's all physics. Then something happens in there, that's chemistry. And then something goes out as a waste product, and something stays in that helps you out, that's biology. So you start rolling it in like this in a way that the kids never really know you're teaching them, but at a certain point we then adapt the whole national curriculum to this. And we do this without horses in schools, or movement method, but we also do it obviously in these playdates. So our idea is that we're going to prepare this, we're going to get this person out of this vicious cycle, put him into this positive cycle, get the brain all fired up, and then start putting in information. And what happens is, after a while, you get good at this, you get a knack for it, and you follow your own interests too. You know, if you're interested in birds, if you're interested in sailing, if you're interested in computers, doesn't matter, but you'll find a way to roll it in. And the kids are like mega into video games. We do a bunch of treasure hunts through the woods or across the fields based around their favorite Minecraft characters. So we'll find a way to bring their love of their computer and their devices and their games and all that stuff into what we do. And we'll never tell them, oh, you've got to put the cell phone down now, you've got to put the tablet down now. No, bring it, absolutely bring it on the horse. But you're going to have so much fun after a while, you'll probably forget. Hand it off to mum. It's really interesting. And you work outside spring, summer, fall. If it's wet, we're all about mud. And we just, appropriately dress. If it's hot, we're all about the sprinkler. We can go in the shade. We can go get warm. We might make a fire in the winter. And little by little, we get success. When the kid gets too big to share the saddle with us, we either work in hand, at the shoulder, with the horse like this. We never lead, we never pull them. If you pull them, you kill that rhythm. The weight goes onto the shoulders, right? You can let them relax a bit if you're out on the trail and they can just have a long rein, but you want to be bringing the horse back into that nice rhythm for the oxytocin as much as you can. Or we use long reins. And the nice thing about that, with the big Western saddle, is we can put mum and kid up there together. Because maybe the kid doesn't know me, doesn't trust me, but mum comes, maybe mum doesn't know anything about horses, doesn't matter, we've prepared our horses very well. So we can put her up there, have someone at the shoulder or in the long reins, give them both the oxytocin, they're cuddling up there, she's doing all the therapy work up there, we're just providing the environment of the horse for her to do that with. So we have another program called Athena, which is doing this with veterans with PTSD. We found that, does anyone here run a therapeutic riding program? You used to. One of the things, who runs a commercial riding program at all? Does anyone ride any sort of commercial riding program? We do, because we also teach dressage. What you always battle with is enough time to lunge your horse and enough time to work your horse in hand. You're so busy giving lessons, you're so busy that you're always a bit, oh shit, I haven't got enough time to work my horse's top line. This way, the clients learn to do it. So we get the young adult autists, the people with PTSD, etc., to do the training that Charlotte, you can teach people to do it very easily. And then suddenly they're training the horses that then go to serve the other clients. So not only does your horse's well-being get looked after, but you serve 2 sets of clients at the same time, and there's no time conflict anymore. So it's interesting. So that's us. That's what we do, and that's what this lovely genius person up there does. And she is a lovely genius person. I've been observing Alex over a few years now, and we train people all over the world. So Horse Boys in about 30 countries. We probably serve about 200,000 families a week through the people that we've trained across the world. Movement method and horsepower method. But there are certain people who stand out that we train, who really go on and nail it and do it really well. She is one of them. And so where you're in a wonderful position is you've got this master horse trainer, and you've got this master kid brain person together. Oh, and the team's actually quite big. Look, we've got Lenny over there, she's really good as well, and we've got Mum and Dad there, they're pretty hot at this as well. And so the whole thing works like a tribe. And that's why I got on a plane at my own expense and came here to do this. I'm going to hope that you'll buy a couple of my books, so I can cover my expenses, they're 20 quid. And I'm going to hope that you go on this website called ntls.co and join it as a gold member for, it's about 200 a year, and you get access to all our stuff, all our lesson plans, but even if you don't, I'll still be your friend. But I would like you to, because that helps me to subsidize what we do. We also work quite a lot for scholarship for free, with low income people, and all of that helps us with the money. But there's a lot of good info on there. Even if you don't join the website, there's a lot of good free info on there, including this brain science. You can get to it as ntls.co or horseboymethod.com or kidsmustmove.com. They'll all bring you to the same spot. And make use of this incredible resource that you've got here. It's not the norm. Your average therapeutic riding place, it's pony club, it's like, you sit still and be a good little kid and wait your turn and da-da. No! That's not who these kids are. You've got to meet them where they are, and you've got to prepare your horse so well, you've got to prepare your environment so that it's effortless for the kid. So you've got her, you've got her, you've got her, you've got him, you've got her. Use them. Chuck money at them. Figure out ways to help them fundraise. Are you a member of a Rotary Club? Have Alex come in and give a little presentation. Are you a member of a golf club? Are you a member of a Lions Club, or a Kiwanis, or a fishing and angling club, or something, or anything, or a riding club? Have her come in and do a demo. Because this is a resource that people need very much. And no, you don't need a horse for it. And not every kid that comes wants to ride all the time. We have to be more flexible than that. But it's quite rare to find this sort of quality. So, lucky you. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got.